Um, you know, you can begin reading the Tibetan almost any place, and as a matter of fact, of course, I get discouraged because there's so, yeah, it's really, really wonderful stuff, and you know, it takes more time than we have. So anyway, let's leave this section with the Tibetan saying that he's going to be more explicit about things than people have been able to be in the past. He's going to lay things out clearer. He's not just going to hint at them. He's going to tell us certain specific things. Like yes.
Does that one have to run?
It's not really supposed to run. It doesn't have to run. No, it can be turned off. It just happens to be running. We won't need it tomorrow morning until we need the Om. Okay, well, I want to, yes, thank you. I want to give room, you know, time later for you to say what you have learned today. And I want to give time to the members out there to be able to join us a little bit with any comments that they may have. So we will leave this right now, which is Monday. Is today Monday? 21 June 12. And let's just say 4:05 p.m. And we'll start on this point later on. Now we'll go back to some important sections because we want to make sure that we get to do at least one rule per session, at least that. And even if we don't get to all the later rules, even the first 7 will amount to a great deal. So we will see. So carrying on where we were before in the rays and the initiations concerning the rules, he says it's the group application of these ideas. In that application, the same basic and profound development must take place, and a group of disciples, that's us, right? Here we are, friends. This is all we need. This is some page or other. This is page 28, perhaps page 29, 28, 29. A group of disciples must be distinguished by pure reason, an intuitive group, which will steadily supersede motive. Motive is based upon a vision of what perhaps is, and pure reason is based upon clear and direct sight of what is, based upon a vision of what might be. Merging eventually into the will of the monad, its major aspect. Now, what are the 3 aspects of the monad? The 3 qualities of the monad? It says here, right? On this map. The 3 aspects of the monad: will, wisdom, activity. The 3 aspects. Okay, so the highest aspect of the monad is the will. So a group of disciples like ourselves, or like anybody that happens to be listening in group formation, must be distinguished by pure reason. And that must merge eventually into the will of the monad. This means that Shambhala, technically considered, will be in direct relation with humanity, the group. So what would it mean if we as a group were distinguished by pure reason? How would we function? Because he says, you know, sometimes there's no argument in the ashram because they all see with clarity the same picture. Of course, other times he says there is discussion about the best method of carrying something out. which is more in relation to plan. But let's call it this. Let's call it pure reason, a group with pure reason. Group with pure reason. That's personality. I won't do. We'll call this unanimity of vision. Or let's call it vision or unanimity of sight. Seeing as if one soul. Now, obviously, we don't have that yet. We haven't worked together long enough over a number of lives, perhaps, to have this. But the hierarchy has this. They have pure reason. So they, the hierarchy, see things as they are. And there's no, could be this, could be that. It is how it is. What, therefore, is the group will in any master's group? Now, in a way, by doing this, we, like earlier disciples, are making an application to Master DK's group. To be part of the master's group, eventually part of the master's ashram, that's what we are here attempting to do. What is the group will in any ashram or master's group? Is it present in any form vital enough to condition the group relations and to unite its members into a band of brothers moving forward into the light? That's quite a vision, isn't it? We get together now and then, we study, etc. But in terms of our dynamic work in the world, are we, what it says here, band of brothers moving forward into the light? That's what I'm trying to, get going in the Moria Federation to a certain degree, because there, all the people who are, let's say, members of the faculty are all working on the same area of service. They serve the students. So because they do that, they can develop this forward thrust in that particular line of service. So let's put it like this. Any group that wants to develop these things has to have a line of service which they have chosen and they are following it. So, doing the full moon meditations is part of that, of course. That is important. But an external work in the world is also, required. Yes. Yes.
When you take the group soul, will it know part of the purpose?
Does the group soul know part of the purpose?
And how would we supersede the group soul?
How would the
sequence?
Okay, let's see. Did I say that exactly? No, okay.
We talk about the hierarchy, the influence of the group. And then I'm thinking about, but what about the group soul itself?
What about the group soul
itself?
itself?
Already part of the
Is it already part of the purpose? Well, I would say group soul is in a way a collection of the egoic lotuses, the causal bodies of all individuals concerned. But what is the level of consciousness of the group soul as it works through the mind in the group personality? So while it is likely that the group soul will have more wisdom than any particular individual, there's no guarantee that the consciousness of the group soul on the level of mind is necessarily sufficient to know the plan. The group soul of hierarchy does know the plan. Their type of consciousness knows the plan. And we are attempting to move in our shared consciousness into the condition where the plan really reflects itself in our collected consciousness.
But if the hierarchy then influence.
Yes. Yes. The hierarchy, yes. We in our meditations, we as a group, with whatever consciousness we have, make application to the higher influence of the hierarchy so that our group consciousness can be illumined. Yeah. Now maybe on the soul level, where we come together as a collection of egoic units, we probably know a lot more. but it has to get into the brain. That's the problem, of course. And that's our work, to get it into the brain. Yes. Okay, now he's asking us some questions, and in a way, he wants us to, somehow answer them. And, mostly we're going to have to say to these questions, no, well, no, not really, no, like that, unfortunately. But he sets a standard for us, a standard. So he says, is the spiritual will of the individual personalities of such strength that it negates the personality relation and leads to spiritual recognition of each other, spiritual interplay, and spiritual relation? See? In other words, if the Vulcan part, the spiritual will, is really sufficient, then we're not just going to look at each other like a bunch of persons that are gathered together. We're going to see beyond that. We're going to say, okay, I recognize you spiritually. I interplay with you spiritually. My relation with you is a soul relation, or even a triadal relation. So he says, this is the function of sufficient spiritual will. So he's asking us these questions, and we, mostly the answer is no, mostly. But basically, when you study with people for many, many years, you get so used to them as a person that you don't worry much about their personhood. You're focused in a different area. I mean, we all know each other, many of us, for a long time. So already we know what we are as persons. But now we're trying to come in touch with each other on a deeper level, which is minimally the soul level. So he asks us, see, ask yourself, what is spiritual will in your life, in my life? What is it? How is your spiritual will functioning? What does it lead to, the spiritual will? What would you say? In other words, in what way do you find yourself responding now to spiritual will at this stage of your life? Where does it come from? It's a really good question. From a certain point of view, look up here. This is where, for practical purposes, the spiritual will comes from, the level of the atmic plane. But we don't have to reach so high. We can find it also here. In this set of petals of the egoic lotus, which is known as the sacrifice set, that's where the spiritual will is coming through. And when the spiritual will comes through, what will be the effect in our lives?
Disaster for the personality life.
I believe it's somewhat true, maybe facetious, but disaster for the person. It's just like the master interfering in your life, in the life of the disciple. In other words, what's the name of those petals, those inner petals, 7, 8, and 9? What's their name? Petals of...
Cluster, sacrifice, and all forever.
Petal 9. It starts us on that particular path to which the third degree initiate is committed, even though perhaps not completely capable yet. Okay, so when spiritual will comes in, it involves sacrifice. So how much comfort do we give up? How much personal preference do we give up in favor of other things that have to be done? DK says, well, everybody talks about service. Service is such a great thing, but few people realize how much sacrifice of time and interest real service involves. So that's interesting, because it does affect the evolutionary process. I remember him talking about the Buddhas of activity, and they are where they are in relation to Sanat Kumara because a certain aspect of sacrifice conditions them. So there may be an apparent temporary retardation of apparent progress in order to engage in spiritual will and sacrifice. So I guess it's a question, the very first law of the soul, the law of sacrifice. So what is it that we find we are sacrificing in order to live more as a soul? Do we find anything in our lives which suggests that we are? I know you're coming to this class, and that in itself is a great sacrifice, but other than that, yes? Is Vulcan working together with Pluto? Yes, what do you mean? Death of something. So Vulcan is the hammer. And Pluto is the cutter, yes, the shears. Whenever you get first-rate planets, they do involve an element of sacrifice. And you know what happens? Vulcan is the spiritual will of the soul. That's what it stands for. And when the soul really exerts its will, is it in friction with the personality will? Oh, I'd like to do this, but I have to do that. That's a standard type of situation in people's lives. If I really, one day DK says something interesting. He says, don't you people realize that perhaps I'm going to paraphrase, okay, that there's some other things we might be interested in other than you? He's basically, somehow saying that, because so selfish is the aspirant that he thinks the masters are living and breathing only to attend to them, that their major preoccupying interest of the masters is them as persons. And DK is trying to say, well, that's not really the case, okay? Some people are asking a superior authority for every move they make in their life. They imagine it. Can I have ham tonight, Master? Oh, thank you. Yes, I can. That kind of thing. And I think it was Edgar Casey on that one. And he said, well, if Casey can't transmute a piece of ham, who can? He said. But, it's not realistic. The higher powers, he says, DK says, I don't know every little thing you're doing. I don't have the time to know. But I can see the effect, in accumulation with these little teraphs. That's what they're called. I was looking for the word this morning. T-E-R-A-P-H. Teraph. Teraph. You make a teraph of astral mental matter, the master does, and it responds to everything that you are and you do. Ugly little teraph. Anyway, so the teraph will reveal to the master exactly what you're feeling and thinking. It's a bit of magic. It's interesting, and there's some kind of sympathetic magic between the teraph and your energy system. So he doesn't have to go to all that effort to try to break through to you. It will be revealed in the condition of your teraph. How interesting, right? You just, it's like Santa Claus. He knows when you've been bad or good. So it's like that. Okay. A teraph, that's what it was. Yeah, it's spelled T-E-R-A-P-H. That's the word, teraph. I was looking for that word earlier this morning. So, this band of brothers moving forward into the light, they really have to have a service project to be able to do that, because that's the only way to move. So, maybe this group, other groups, have to consider whether the impact in the outer world is sufficient in a group sense, because that will lead to progress. Okay. And then when we relate to each other, are we relating like people or are we relating like souls? In other words, it sounds like a trite thing to say, but when you look at somebody that you're in the group with, do you see them as a personality or do you see them as a soul? It's a question. Know what I mean? It takes a certain spiritual quality to see another person as a soul. And where does that quality come from? There's a map. And here is the map. It is from this level of the mental plane that the ability to see another as a soul originates. It's called spiritual discernment. Behind the obvious is something else. What is the obvious? So think of how it's almost like a psychic ability to be able to look beyond what a person appears to be and discover what they really are. So how do we cultivate that? What would you suggest? You know, how do you look through somebody so you don't get fooled by what's on the surface? How do you do that? Or do you just somehow do it in time? You know, you get more, psychological and have more ability to see behind the obvious. That's so important. And it begins on the higher mental plane with spiritual discernment. You know this map. I'm going to show you a map. This map was put together by Keith Bailey. Here, every one of those cities is given in terms of its ray and so forth. So there it is. On the higher mental plane, you can discern, you can make out, you can see what lies behind the obvious. I think that's a good practice, Like you go out one fine day and you say, okay, today I'm going to make an effort to see the soul in everyone I meet. And I don't think it will be found to be an easy thing, because we're always misled by the obvious, But, you remember what he says in the esoteric healing? He says, meditate on your patient for 5 hours before you meet him. Isn't that interesting? The number 5, the soul, the revelation. 5 hours pondering somebody before you meet. If astrologers did that, they couldn't make a living.
How would you define the difference between higher clairvoyance and lower or astral clairvoyance?
I think that there's an ability here to see the geometrical forms of the mental plane.
That's what he says. Period. That's all he says.
Okay. Does he even say that? But, to me it makes sense that there are all these astral forms and they're quite fluid and they don't have a particularly geometric shape or anything of that nature, and you can see them. And then something else comes in and you can see on the mental plane those other kinds of configurations which are different from the fluid astral forms. That's how I would define it. Like in a dream, what do you see in a dream? When you dream, do you dream on the mental plane or do you dream on the astral plane? I think most of us dream on the astral plane. But maybe there are some highly geometric dreams. I think that's where you are using or seeing with higher clairvoyance.
There must be other ways that higher clairvoyance is expressing itself.
Well, it's not very, it's not very high ability, actually, if you look at where it's found. But of course, I would have to agree with you, so one would have to study the psychic literature and see what is revealed.
But it's surprising to see even that high up.
Yes, it's the part of the sense of touch. Healing is always related, every sixth plane is related to the sense of touch, the healing touch. Even the touch of your aura, as it has an effect upon another person. So this is a synthetic, harmonic, Buddhic capability. When you're starting to function on the Buddhic plane, then a certain power of harmonization is yours. And it's the harmonizing touch. But you see how it works. Hearing is the 7th plane. Touching is the 6th plane. Seeing is the 5th plane. Tasting is the 4th plane. and smelling is the fifth plane, numbering from below to above. So even what seems to be like our primitive senses, the taste and the smell, are actually rather elevated from the occult perspective. And these are our methods of understanding more about the world. So, there's no getting around it. Unless we become more sensitive beings, whole areas of life are going to be closed to us. We can talk about them, but it's a bit like, talking about the menu without eating the meal. So sensitivity is required. And of course, the love energy sensitizes, and that's one of the reasons that love brings revelation. Sensitivity to impression is revelation. The more sensitive, the more the revelation, and love cultivates sensitivity to the other, whatever it is.
So proper healing takes place after the third initiation.
Okay. Yes, when the third eye is open.
So in order to practice as a healer, you need to have the third.
Well, no, you've got to, nothing happens overnight. So we ascend by our mistakes.
You have to train.
What is it?
You have to exercise.
Yes, you have to prepare. In other words, you can do some good with blessing. You can transfer certain kinds of energy. But to really, really know what you're doing in a clairvoyant way, then I would say at least access to these energies via the Antakarana is necessary. See, will the Antakarana connect you with any of these things? In a way? Suppose you build the bridge here. Can you then be connected with some sort of downflow from these higher places? I would say yes, but the true healers are the members of the hierarchy. Jesus or Christ, they were members of the hierarchy, so they could do what they did. They knew exactly what they were doing. We are practicing. And you know how it is, you cannot achieve high things without the preliminary sequential steps of practice. It just takes time, doesn't it? And people say, hey, but I want to be enlightened overnight. I'm remembering someone was telling me the other day, if I just follow the sound current, it will lead me to permanent enlightenment. Okay, everybody's looking for the easy way. If you use the word easy and the word enlightenment together, you can attract a lot of attention. Of course, sometimes we make things more difficult for ourselves than they need to be. So in that respect, there is a way of ease. In the Tao, what do they call it? Effortless effort. There's always a paradox built in Taoism. But in general, this takes lives of practice. Now, Master DK will reappear. He'll be one of the externalizing masters. Somehow he's so closely connected with the physical plane in a certain sense. When I look at his picture, which I think is a pretty good likeness of him, not the one downstairs, but, the one that's right over there around the corner, I think of Taurus and, for the light, and of Gemini for the messenger. Taurus and Gemini together. I get that sense of the brilliant illumination of Mercury, Venus together. So somehow he has that down-to-earth quality, and he'll be teaching a lot of people who are not yet third-degree initiates how they can do something useful. I would say that when selfishness leaves, self-centeredness, when you take the second initiation and your spiritual will triumphs over your selfish desire, then I think you can be used. I think so. What's the very first thing in healing? Do no harm, isn't it? Part of the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. So you would think you wouldn't have to tell doctors that or people in the healing field. But I was really interested to see how much egoism goes along with being a healer. You know what I mean? Let me heal you. That kind of thing. The ego is involved. Lower ego.
Do you have any idea of those 4 sounds in comprehension?
I haven't thought about it. tell you the truth. I suppose it has to do with the 4 rays of aspect, so of attribute, and if it has to do with the 4 rays of attribute, and I'm looking for musical sounds, I would find the note B, A, or C, F, no, maybe not, no, E. So I've got sort of like B, maybe C for 6th ray, maybe the note E for the 4th ray, and the 5th ray would be A. But I'm not sure we can reduce this to musical sound. Maybe it's the sounds of the 4 personality elementals as they are conditioned or emanate the sound. I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. On the Buddhic plane, a man proceeds to find the note of his planetary logos. I never read that before. On the Buddhic plane, a man, what is this, begins, or I don't know what that word is, do you?
Begins to find the note.
Well, it begins to find the note of his planetary logos. What are the notes of our planetary logos? I would say that they are repeated in the musical cadence when symphonies and pieces of music end. Fa, sol, do, dum, bum, bum. I think they climax on many, many pieces of music. The subdominant of the 3rd ray, the dominant of the 2nd, and the tonic of the 1st ray. Green, blue, red, green, blue, red. I think those are the particular notes of our planetary logos. Right now, we're in the blue system. So we're in the soul system, S-O-L. And we're in the system whose note is G. This is the G system. And the last system was the Fa system, the green system. Anyway, all of this stuff is called by an interesting name, spiritual numerals. All of these notes and sounds and colors and different abilities, they are called spiritual numerals. So we have to learn how to calculate using them. And all spiritual numerals are based upon vibration. So we're going to have to learn the specific vibrations of all of these different abilities and the notes, pitches, sounds that come forth from these areas. This is concrete, specific 5th ray occultism. We're going to have to learn that. And in the future, we will be given the means to learn these specificities. What Master D.K. said, look, he says, all I've given you is the generalities. He really says that. He says, even in Cosmic Fire, what I've given you is the outline method. He calls Cosmic Fire an outline that he could fill in later with the details. You know how he often says, it would take several volumes to elaborate this idea. An entire treatise could be written on, and he goes on and so forth.
What do you see with divine vision?
I believe it is a sort of a higher correspondence to the abstract mind, and I believe that it has a lot of the 5th ray in it. I believe it's a revelation of the world of light, and you begin to see where the plan is tending, the developmental process of many things working together. It's an opening up of the eye to see the more universal process, but it's not yet the full intuition. Not yet. It's not yet the straightest knowledge. It's not yet immediate contact with ideas. It's seeing the vision of what ideas are, what is their nature. But there's a difference, and here's the point. There's a difference between vision and revelation. Vision is like a film, a curtain, a veil, somewhat revelatory, but not yet the revelation. I believe the revelation comes with the true intuition. You know, every one of these, I've written about them to a degree in my commentaries on these sections in the Treatise on Cosmic Fire. It's kind of interesting that chakras are not found below the fourth level. You know what I mean? Here, take a look at this. Take a look at this thing. Look at the chakras which are found in our worlds. Here, let's blow this up a little bit.
Did you say the fourth level?
Uh-huh. Chakras are not found below the fourth level.
Okay.
Because the chakras are etheric in nature. And so there is a correspondence to the etheric plane on every plane. The lowest level of the ethers is the fourth ether. So all of these lower three subplanes on every level correspond to the dense physical level where glands are found and not chakras. So the etheric part of any plane is 4, 3, 2, and 1. So what's interesting is when you look at the map earlier and you look here at the intuition, it's the first of the Buddhic levels on which chakras are found on the Buddhic plane. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is chakras are found on all planes. And the fact that Master DK did not draw them just means he didn't draw them. Remember, we've said that 35 vortices of force make a master. 35 vortices of force. A master is mastering the atmic plane, isn't it so? So just count, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 5 times, and you have the 35 vortices of force. And eventually the egoic lotus goes away, and I suppose you will have 3 chakras in its place on the first, second, and third subplanes of the mental plane. Anyway, then I think 49 vortices of force make a Chohan, and 42 vortices of force make a Chohan, 49 make a Christ, or something like that. So it's all hidden in number and in vibration. All these secrets are hidden in that way. And we're going to have to use the fifth ray to find out about this stuff. Yes?
But they do have colors.
Sure, they will. They will. The whole thing is color, but in a general sense.
But they don't have colors and they don't have colors?
Wait, they don't have what?
The chakras, you say the chakras don't have...
They have their own colors. They have their own colors, just like the lower chakras do, right? Like Leadbeater shows us, and DK confirms it, what are the colors of the lower chakras. And the higher ones would as well. The whole thing, every time there's a veil, there are colors. Color means veil. In one sense, the whole 4 higher planes are violet in color. All of them, regardless of what the subcolors may be. From another perspective, all the lower planes are green in color because they connect with Saturn and the lower third ray. So it's colors upon colors upon colors, note upon note upon note. And in the fifth ray age that's coming, because Aquarius is fifth ray, with seventh ray and fourth ray supporting, we're going to learn all about this vibratory language in a more precise way. Now people says, hey, try this color, it will heal you. Okay, it might, but the real science of the healing frequency is not there. I saw from Greta a long time ago, I saw a picture under a microscope, under the Rife microscope, of a cancer cell being exploded by a particular frequency. Very interesting. A particular frequency exploded this particular type of cell. Now just imagine harnessing number in that way so we could affect our environment either to promote or to destroy. This would be real manipulation of matter through frequency, math, vibration, and so forth. And of course, the color would be there because the color also carries a certain frequency. Well, okay. You know, occultism, it's just an endless science, isn't it? We're just now a little bit of the mystery is being lifted for us. Just a little bit of the veil is being lifted. We have been in a state of deep ignorance for a long time. You know, it says the Blessed One came forth in ignorance. He wandered in a darkness deep of spirit. He saw no reason for this way of life. I'm speaking now about the fifth ray monad, you know, who tries to know things, wants to know things. So, you know, and it ends with the idea that he lost himself and fear entered in. So he needs to start a deeper search to find his way out of matter, which he cannot control. And of course, he ends up being able to control matter. He says, I mastered energy. I am energy itself. The master and the mastered are but one. So finally, he gets a grip on matter. He can control it. Now, what I'm trying to say to you, the age of Aquarius is coming. It has a fifth ray personality. Humanity will have a fifth ray personality in the age of Aquarius. The fifth ray is the major ray that comes through Aquarius at this time, and it will be the major source of the fifth ray, just like Leo is right now. It's going to be a time of subtle science. So all of us are going to have to learn to use the fifth ray, even the way certain of the scientists are learning right now to use it, going very deep into the structure of dense matter. But what happens when we begin to study, like the biologists are, the genetic structure of man in a fifth ray way? A very big project, isn't it, at the moment? What happens when we start to study the astral plane using the fifth ray, or the mental plane using the fifth ray? Higher and higher examples of the fifth ray. What happens when we study the soul body using the fifth ray? Whole new revelations will be ours. And we will change our religious approach from mystical, based on touch, to sight. It will be a big, big change. So, you know, we have centuries of research before us, even though the afternoon can seem long. Okay. Okay. So anyway, is the spiritual will of such a strength that we can recognize each other as souls? We'd have to answer that ourselves. You have to answer it to yourself. What does it mean for me to see someone as a soul? And I'll tell you what, it means getting a lot of other stuff out of the way so one can really see. Oh, I'm so used to you, I don't even look at you anymore. You know what I mean? That's how it can be with people. Oh yeah, I know you. That means I saw your face once or something. But do I really take my 5 hours and meditate and, you know, find who you are in this busy Western life? Maybe not, huh? Okay. It is only in, now here he says, it says a strict thing here. It is only in consideration of these fundamental effects of standing as a group in the head's clear light that it is permissible for disciples to bring into the picture personal sensitivities and thought. And this is only because of a group temporary limitation. Oh, I feel this way. Oh, I think that way. He's trying to say that in a real group ruled by pure reason, that kind of personal stuff is just not allowed. It just expresses the limitation, temporary limitation of the group. So you can see this is a bit far ahead of us in terms of how we conduct our group process. Okay. All right. You know, sometimes I'll bet people are wishing that we would sing after lunch. Right, Gisela?
Yes, I just said that.
Yes. Yes. If I'm just feeling like reviving the operas, if only to make Gisela happy. Don't you think?
Just a brief session.
Just
Never give up.
never give in. Rise and rise again. That's what you remember. That's the thing from Mars. It's a Mars song. Well, pretty soon you're going to get to hear all of these songs sung by professional singers. They're getting ready now. And then you'll be able to have fond memories of how it was for you. I know many people with memories of standing eternally on the floor, looking below, wishing they could crash, but knowing that still 2.5 hours lay before them of standing up. I would think that any person who directed such a thing would be half mad, wouldn't you? Maybe not even half. Okay, anyway, it probably made an impression on some. One person whom I trust, and who was one of your teachers, said that he learned more about esoteric astrology from those rituals than in any other way. So I'm very happy for his recommendation on the back of my book, So yes, we learn to stand. That's a brilliant thought, and I'm so happy you recommended it to me.
Vertical orientation.
Exactly. We stood, and I want to tell you, that a lot of will energy did come in while standing. Of course, sometimes it had to just to keep standing, but it was. There were many willful moments with the standing group. It was a great discipline, and you can only be happy that I've gotten more tired as I've gone on in life. Otherwise, we could be doing it right now. Yes, very good, Anne. Thank you so much for giving me more ammunition to meet my critics. It was fun. It was a different day, It was a different. Ladies, you have to be graceful. You have to get up gracefully, and you've been kneeling for half an hour. It seems like a reasonable request. Well, you didn't see what I saw and how people were getting up. Well, we certainly did bring it into the physical body, didn't we? Yes, and I only feel sorry for those students of occultism who missed the experience. I would like to offer it to them again. Yeah, we had the basement, and we even had the big room over there, which was a terrible thing to do to the patients. I oftentimes have this twinge of regret about how many patients we kicked out of the big room. This was a terrible thing. Then we had this big room, and then we moved down gradually to the lower room, and well, then it got too compressed. Then we had a little ritual standing here in a circle. Now you're standing in the light, and the ray has changed, and you're no longer subjected to the fourth ray in quite the same way. No, now it's more the second ray. Okay, well, let's go on here. You're bringing me back to the good old days, I'm really feeling a little bit of nostalgia for those immoderate days, days when the class kept going till 11 at night and where we stood for 3 hours at a time. I could get sentimental over such things. Nobody will believe what you've been through. Okay. But I regret that we've never had maybe a full ritual with Gisela present. I feel this is his great loss. Yes, and it would make a dramatic difference in the number of students that you teach if you would begin to do my rituals.
Well, I have a copy of the CD.
Oh, you do? Yes, okay.
I'm still considering.
Oh, okay. Well, they're getting better now. And you could reduce your number of students drastically by doing my rituals.
What I was saying, those guys, they would be better singers than we were.
Oh, certainly not. Even though they've sung opera half their life, they weren't better singers than you. Never. No. No. You all were incomparable. That's what I would say. Unable to be compared to anything else, really. Incomparable. But I always used idealism when I heard the sound of the choir. I imagined how it really should sound while it was sounding as it was sounding. And somehow the ideal won. I kept on hearing perfection. So thank you. Thank you for many hours of suffering in the cause. Okay. Yes, yes. And one of these days when you don't expect it, we will return to, yes, one of these days, yes, yes. There's still maybe one ritual we haven't done. Or maybe, and it's still, well, maybe we did. Did we do the Ray Lord's ritual ever? Never did the Ray Lord's ritual, complete with DK's words. Oh.
Yes, I think we did.
It's funny how Gisela remembers suddenly. Well, a little comic relief, okay. So what is it, therefore, which prevents the disciple as an individual from having direct approach and direct contact with a master without being dependent on an intermediary? That is a big question. Because think of it, Alice Bailey was the great intermediary for all these people. They would not have known what Master DK was thinking for them, thinking about them, without Alice Bailey to write the letters in which he dictated for them. So this is an important question, right? Let me illustrate. In the group I have under training, this group appeared in Discipleship 1 and 2, 2 or 3 have direct approach. In other words, not just Alice Bailey, maybe Foster Bailey, maybe another person, I'm not sure. And others have direct approach, but don't know it. They could get through. They actually do get through, but they don't know they're getting through. Isn't that interesting? Still others are well-intentioned and hard-driving disciples, but never for a second do they forget themselves. So it's like this bit about not being able to forget your little self is preventing you from getting through to the master. So what did he say? Decentralization brings knowledge, even knowledge of the master. So I think that's quite a hint. He's saying what prevents you from getting through to the master? And he says, some, they're really sincere, but they don't forget themselves for a single minute, therefore they can't get through to me. Okay. One, he's getting specific here, has a problem of glamour, but now is preoccupied with the problem of spiritual ambition. A spiritual ambition which is working through a very small personality. How would you like to be the person who says, does he mean me? You know, obviously this is, you know, could be construed as criticism, but DK would call it analysis within the field of love. That's what he would call it, you know. Some could make rapid progress, but are too prone to inertia. Perhaps I could say they do not care enough. Well, one sees this all the time. Oh, it's just too much for me. Oh, I can't do that. I can't get myself going. Inertia takes over. It's the Taurus part of, well, I don't know. Sometimes I think that if you look at the earth signs, that from one perspective, Taurus represents the tamas, a Capricorn represents rajas, and Virgo represents sattva. You know, those aspects. On the other hand, once the bull gets going, it has a tremendous forward momentum. So, you know, each one of us can place ourselves here. with respect to our spiritual studies. So each one of these disciples, he says, and every other disciple can place himself. So he's asking us to do that. Do we have direct contact and know it? Do we have it and not know it? Are we very sincere but we don't forget ourselves? Or are we just too inert to really care and really try? He gives us those 4 possibilities. See, I think that this question of getting through to the Master has a lot to do with what your service is and how much one really needs to get through to the Master in order to improve the quality of service. Because, you can't say, Master, I'm having a tough time in my personal life. Can you please help me? That's not going to work. It's all about the condition of the instrument so that a better form of service can be offered, and the condition of circumstances so you can meet circumstance in a more intelligent, loving, and willful way. That will be allowed. So until we're really involved in our service, this question of getting through to the Master, maybe it's not such an issue, Okay, all of these disciples, they desire to move forward and they possess a strong inner spiritual life. Hence, that means regardless if they're false, at least they have a strong inner spiritual life. Hence, my finding the time to work with them. I recognize their aspiration. Therefore, I find the time to work with them. But the group Antikarana is still incomplete, and the aspect of pure reason and of the heart does not control. That's what he said about his group of disciples, and it probably was, by the time he wrote this, a group of 24 disciples. The number of Shambhala. You know how he started? 9, 9, 9, 9. All those groups were meant to be groups of 9. It didn't work out. Second World War came in. Then he changed the group and made it into 24 people. He said, okay, some of you, you won't be part of this because you have reached the high water mark for this particular life. You know what a high water mark is in a flood? We used to have floods where I used to live in North Dakota, a very flat place. There was a bridge, and from past floods, they would have marks to show how high the flood waters had come before going down. That's called a high water mark. And in our life, sometimes physically, we reach a high water mark at a certain point. But in terms of our consciousness, we should not go down with the water. You know what I mean? In other words, even though physically we may begin to decline, consciousness should continue to go up. And he says that's the big challenge. Because as we get older, we tend to, have all the things associated with older age and, aches and pains and inertia and loss of vitality. And yet, your consciousness is supposed to continue to rise. Otherwise, your soul will take you out of incarnation. Well, specifically between the ages of 56 and 63, that's a big issue.
Why 56 and 63?
It just, 7 times 9 is 63. It's the number of people you can have in an ashram, and it represents a certain completion of the system of 7 and 9. It's a multiple. And he simply says that you have reached at that point the time when the soul makes a judgment. So after 63, generally, or around that time, if you live through that time, you will be in a better position to keep going. There are certain decisive moments of that nature. It has to do with the second Saturn return, which exists within that period. It's a time of spiritual decision about the last third of your life. And when the third Saturn return comes, right in that period, when your Uranus return comes, and you're about 84 years old, and then you're 87 years old when the third Saturn return comes, I've seen that as a time of exit for people. And then I've seen when they live beyond that point, then they continue to live. There are certain of these crisis moments which are archetypal. I remember that the year 1942, very important because, as you know, the Second World War was won in 1942 subjectively, was the beginning of a 7-year and 9-year cycles. And the next time they came together was in, how did it work? Was in 2005. From 1942 to 2005 was the climax of a 63-year period which fulfilled 9 cycles of 7 and 7 cycles of 9. 2005. So, you know, behind all of our activity are these 7-year, 9-year, and 3-year cycles. And, of course, we want to learn how to cooperate with them. Crisis, tension, emergence. That's the new group of world service cycle. But I would say the second Saturn return has a lot to do with it. And the whole idea of just the number 9 as being the number of completion and the number 7 as being the number of a partial completion. He just says that's the moment. Those 7 years are the years of decision, and people face not a crisis of opportunity. They better have responded to that earlier. They face a crisis of expression. Now, many of us are in that, you know, we've either been through that age category or we have headed for it, you know, heading for it. A crisis of expression, meaning, well, you know, from the year 56 to 63. He describes the crisis of expression. It's very interesting. He basically says, can you, despite the fact of your tapering physical vitality, express in the world that which you have developed by responding earlier to your crisis of opportunity? Meaning, can you really bring it through? Can you bring esotericism through and what is revealed to you on the physical plane? Now, I think, you know, we can evaluate our own life, and I think that in many ways, many of us have done that. But the real crisis of expression comes later. And the crisis of opportunity, it's when you first respond. That's earlier in the life. It is interesting that when an ashram reaches 63 members, it has to start a new one. It can't go to number 64. 63 is the last number that is allowed. All of this is controlled by number. Okay, so the condition of the group, they really don't have the connection with the spiritual triad adequately. The evocative power of the spiritual triad is not, therefore, adequate to hold the personality steady. And the invocative power of the personality is non-existent. This is kind of a brutal assessment of how things stood. You know, Master DK had high hopes. There were all kinds of things that happened in the world. You know, it was not necessarily a foregone conclusion that there would have been a World War II. Atomic energy was discovered, which was not expected, even by the hierarchy. So a lot of things happened to change the plans of the masters. And he's just, you know, here he is at a certain point looking back and he's saying, well, the group personality was not steady because the power of the spiritual triad was not enough. And the personality, non-existent. The invocative power of the personality was non-existent. So it's quite a harsh assessment on the condition of the group. See, the group kind of, in a way, fell apart into different individuals doing what they were interested in doing. It did not come together and do a group project. So I've tried to correct that tendency in the Moria Federation by saying, okay, folks, if you're with it, this is what we work on. This is our project. You know, just, it's educational seed group project. We share everything we know with our students. They become teachers eventually and so forth. This is what we do. So there would be something on the physical plane which we do together. And then the ashramic upreach would have a basis in the outer world. We could move in two directions at the same time. That is something that didn't quite happen, I think, in Master DK's group. I don't know the ins and outs. I wasn't there. But I believe that they failed to form their outer united project. And he wanted it to be a project that was related to his work, not some bright disciple saying, why don't we try this? Oh, why don't we try that? He really wanted it to be part of his ashramic work, which did not happen. So, so the invocative power, the personalities could not call down the energy of the spiritual triad. He says, speaking from the angle of the group personalities which make up the personality aspect of the ashram. And he's saying, people don't want me to talk about this. He's saying, this is a factor with which they, the members, oft feel I have not to deal. I shouldn't mention this. I should not mention this. It can only become a potent factor if certain personality relations are adjusted and inertia is overcome. Then and only then can the group stand. And so we come right back to where we were this morning. Within the fire of mind, focused within the head's clear light, let the group stand. How can the group stand? What kind of personality relations would have to be adjusted? Inertia is easy, right? People don't care enough, so they don't get themselves moving. They won't, they won't stick with it, really go to the... But what about personality relations? What about those? Many different lower types of interaction getting in the way. Dislike, envy, jealousy, criticism, all those nice, juicy things, which I don't, sense so much here in this group, really. Of course, a lot of members in this group have been working together for a long time. And time, this stuff wears away, because you say, that's nothing, that doesn't count, that's not important. So the lower stuff wears away. You know what I mean? Well, he's an experiment was undertaken, and he's telling us where it succeeded and where it failed. And this is a lesson for us as we begin to think about our group work together. Only then can the group stand. Okay. My goodness, we have completed sentence 1. This is very, very good. It is my goal and high hope that we will make it through all of the sentences of Rule 1 this time. We may spend a little more time on these early rules because they are the ones that we might possibly be able to fulfill a little bit. When you get into the later rules, 4th initiation, 5th initiation, all that kind of stuff, all you can do is learn about them. You can't really fulfill them per se. So are there any thoughts or questions on our work thus far in Rule 1? Within the fire of mind, focused within the head's clear light, let the group stand. That is sentence 1 of Rule 1. Because I'm going to ask you in just a few minutes, I'm going to ask you for what you may have, about what you may have remembered today, what may have impressed you today, what particular learning came up for you today. I'm going to ask you those questions. I know, it's a lot of concentration. I'm aware of that. It's a higher level of concentration than we may be used to giving over a sustained period of 1 week, 5 days. I know that. But of course, that doesn't make me feel sorry for you in the slightest, because I think it is a great opportunity for us to be able to get together and really pour over these golden words from Master DK. basically he was writing for people who would come at the end of the century, the 20th century, and the beginning of the next, up into the year 2025 especially. That's who he was writing for. So that's us. This is the beginning of the 21st century. Still. Any thoughts? Any complaints? Nice day though, isn't it? Beautiful day out there. Beautiful day. How's the inner weather going? Does it does it seem like a lot to assimilate? Perhaps. I've read it over so many times, and maybe some of you have also, but it always gets deeper. See, it all has to do with the degree to which we really want to be group workers and participate in the new program of group initiation. That's what's involved here. Now, some of us are older, you know, and maybe not so many years remain, but we are certainly preparing for that which is coming. I mean, if we were 30 years old, it would be a different thing. But then we wouldn't understand as much as we understand now, you see. So I think we're in a very good position to set up for our participation in these things in a future incarnation, which I think will not be very long away. I think a lot of new school work has to be done in the next 100 years. I think so. To counterbalance the ridiculous thought forms concerning the future of humanity, which are prevalent in the minds of so many. Those old thoughts have to change. And I was saying, I think someone here, that it's the vision which the second-rate types can give, which is so important in stabilizing the consciousness of humanity. So it's a big job to convey this vision to others, even in little ways. You possess, through your studies, something that not many people possess. It is a vision of truth, which can greatly help humanity find its way. So how do we get that across to other people, no matter whom it is? See, I found when I was on the plane, this guy was studying the Bible, very nice man. I had an opportunity. How would I go about that? Because I know he's really in the 6th ray, 5th ray mode. He's looking at this as the last word. This is the last word. Did I have enough skill and action to do that? Or immediately would he be put off by what I was saying? I tried to be skillful. So far, he seems to be interested. We both use the 5th ray to determine where our points of view seemed to diverge. So we agreed to disagree about certain things, you see. But, you know, we all have a chance, like Finn here, you know, he's had many, many patients that have come through this hospital. Well, they come through a hospital that is founded by a man who's steeped in the esoteric knowledge for 50 years or more. It can't help but rub off on them, you see. Then he has his lectures and he gives aspects of esotericism in those lectures. We all influence each other, don't we? And it's really, really important that this major, you know, how DK calls it, second ray propaganda effort. He actually calls it that, meaning you're supposed to propagate certain ideas out there in the consciousness of humanity. It's really important that it get hold. Remember, he said some very frightening things, you know. He said back in the old days that if the billions or whatever it was that was going into armaments and other things were not directed into education, then humanity was headed for real trouble. And of course, that huge amount of money was not redirected into education. And humanity is in big trouble, just as he said. Well, I try to be an optimist about this, you know. I don't want to think that we have to pass through that kind of situation I keep on hoping there's a more intelligent way to somehow make our transition. But remember what he said, if just enough people of goodwill had been found before World War II, there wouldn't have had to be World War II. Enough people of goodwill. So what does that say to us about impending conflicts? We need to counterbalance that somehow. That's a big responsibility, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it. And if we say, oh, well, someone else can take that responsibility, or other people are in a better position than I am to take that responsibility. So if we say that, then we are really dropping our responsibility. If anything, for anyone alive during these next 12 or 13 years, and anybody who's spiritual, the burden on the shoulders of such people is going to be very, very heavy, very heavy. So one has to think twice about what one intends to do. As DK says, we must all count the cost. You've heard him say that, right? You have to count the cost of what you are involved in and see if you are willing to pay the cost. I mean, it might look like quite a benign thing. We're gathered to study on a beautiful day in a beautiful place. You have a nice study group, study, but the situation could get such that the people who believe as we believe and who say what we say are pursued because their ideas are not in line with a prevailing orthodoxy. It could happen. So we have to be ready for that, and that's where we will see whether we have courage. Because DK did say two things about this. He said, I could wish you were younger. Well, that's nice. He says, I could wish you were younger, as he looked at the group, and he says, and I could wish you were more courageous. Younger and more courageous. Well, about one, you can't help too much. But
younger than this guy, or
well, he was looking at his group. Okay. And he was saying, geez, you're a bunch of old people here. You know, so, so I could wish you were younger and more courageous. See, that was at the time of the Second World War, but we will be tested, you can be sure. You know, I don't want to be pessimistic about this, but what happened to John the Baptist? Oops. So the new group of world servers is the John the Baptist. It's the forerunner of the new age. So that kind of testing against the powers that be, I think, is inevitable. So I guess we have to get ready for sacrifice if we're not already involved in it at this time. What I'd like to do now, maybe to, you know, lessen the tension and so forth, I'd like to take some notes about what it is you think that impressed you today. What did you get out of today? What thoughts came to you that were more significant maybe than others? And then I'm going to also open it up to our friends out there. There are 20, well, there are about 19 of us, I guess, who are gathered at this time on the net. And then I'm going to ask them how they felt about that. So I sometimes call this What's Stuck, day one. Okay, what's stuck on day one? So let me see if I can find the, I get so that I make a bunch of categories and then I lose them. It's terrible. FEF text, Treatise in Elfin Forest, Denmark, semester 10. Oh, I'm going to, I think I've kind of lost it, you know. So I'm going to have to make another one. What shall I call this? Something like Rays and Initiations? Nations classes. We do have an interesting conjunction on our midheaven of this class of Chiron and Neptune in Pisces. This could be problematic a little bit. So we will see, you know, we have to work for Finn's recovery. And, you know, using what we know about esoteric healing. All right, so I will ask you then. I'm just lessening the tension here. My tendency is to forge ahead, but I think we might be better just kind of talking about what struck us today in what we studied, and in the meditation within the fire of mind, focus within the head's clear light, let the group stand. So as you said early, what does it mean to stand? That is one thing that came through to us. What other things? So we talked about inclusive reason and a pure reason. Someday I'm going to have to discriminate between those two. They are very similar. But inclusive reason has a lot to do with the appreciation of wholeness and all of the relations within it. And pure reason is a function of the intuition and also relates to wholeness, perceiving the universal. He says intuition isn't what we think it is. We've done that many times, haven't we? Intuition is not what we think. It is not a psychic punch about how knowledge works out. It's a realization of wholeness, primarily. Intuition is that. And then seeing the place of all things within that whole. Seeing the place of all within the wholeness, which is realized. Okay, what other factors? See, this is a big job of assimilation. I know that. You know, I really know it. Okay, yes, sir.
We also talked about inclusive reason, which was released by the heart.
Inclusive
Reason.
And its relation
By the heart.
to the heart.
Because on Buddhic plane, the eye is open.
Buddhic plane and the eye of the Buddhic plane. I have to make this less. Yes, the eye of the Buddhic plane. You know, there is a very, it's called the blue eye. And the Buddhic plane, as far as the planetary logos is concerned, its color is blue. For the solar logos, it may be violet, but for the planetary logos, the color of the Buddhic plane is blue. So at every initiation, at each initiation, more and more Buddhi comes into the consciousness. It's almost as if initiation is about the addition of Buddhi to the human consciousness. That's really what initiation is. More and more of the cosmic ethers are revealed in the process of initiation. And, you know, the Christ is the great example in humanity of the Buddhic energy, and he is the initiator of the first two initiations. And his planet is Neptune, which is the major, I think, the major Buddhic planet. So mind alone is not enough to bring about what we call initiations. Buddhi is needed. Buddhi is needed in the initiation process from the first, because even the birth of the Christ in the heart is the addition of some of the Buddhic energy. Okay, what else?
Love reveals the structure of the eye.
Love reveals the structure of the, I would say, world of being. In other words, where do archetypes come from? Arise in the world of being. And love reveals the geometry of these archetypes. I think the most important statement there basically is that love reveals. So, you know, if you want to know more, you decentralize yourself and love more. That's interesting. In other words, let's look at what we might call the path to omniscience. Omniscience is kind of a second-rate term. It is decentralization and love. Because, you know, when you get yourself off the center of your self-concern, the whole world of possibility begins to open up. In other words, let's say your personality is not blocking your vision in the larger sense. So, you know, you look at someone like Mother Teresa, and, well, she had her problems, of course. But she really was so much into the condition of other people. She was out of her own way in that respect. You know the story of her receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. You know, she was getting quite impatient with the whole ceremony. Obviously not too much seventh ray. She said, look, can you just give me the money so I can get back and help? You know, I get back and help the people. You know, just give me the money. She was a Virgo with Sagittarius rising. Yeah. She had a bit of the first ray. She had Pluto on the 7th house cusp. So they considered her to be an incarnation of Kali, the goddess of death. Kali in India, K-A-L-I. Like, you know, how different people who show certain qualities are considered symbolically to be incarnations of a certain deity. So she was connected with Kali. And with Pluto at the 7th house cusp, I think you can, you know, you can see that. She worked with the dead and dying, you know. That's what she did. That's how she met people, on the basis of their suffering and death. So, you know, what was her ray? It, you know, probably a second ray monad, but 6th ray soul. You know, that's what it seems to me. The whole issue was about faith and her loss of faith, and different things came out later. But she was certainly one who would fulfill her duty no matter what. That's what a good Virgo person will do. And her Sagittarius took her out there into these very underprivileged areas. Have you been to India? So maybe you know how some people have to live. I tell you, when I was in India, it was a really eye-opener for me. Things have fallen so low in a way compared with the great philosophy of the ancient times. I don't know if I was planning to see the Upanishads or what, but I saw a lot of blue choking smoke and pollution, you know, and people begging everywhere and taking advantage in every way and in a miserable state. So sometimes, you know, you live in a progressive country like Denmark or you know, or even Norway, that kind of thing, and you find it's a world apart from the way the other people are living. Yeah. It's such, you know, such a gap. Now, why does that gap exist? You know, it might be because of the mental power of some of the more advanced countries. And it might just also have to do with selfish manipulation of resources. That also can exist. What other things will we be talking about that may have been of note or of interest?
I didn't quite understand this tarot.
Teraf.
Yeah,
Who is Teraf? Teraf is a astro mental model of the disciple. So the master, by whatever means, constructs this model of the disciple, and the model is related by sympathetic magic to the energy system of the disciple, and every change in the disciple is reflected in the teraf. So somewhere It's like a little, the lower expression of this is like voodoo dolls or something. We have a doll that represents you, so we stick pins in it. That kind of thing. It's a very low form of the same sympathetic magic relationship. This is meant to gauge the progress of the disciple. Because, in order to be initiated, you have to have sponsors, you have to be recommended, the initiator has to agree, the evidence has to be there. Maybe sometimes risk is taken, even, there's probably some shades of gray in deciding yes, ready, and not ready. I'm remembering when Master DK and Master KH were discussing Roberto Assagioli, who was an initiate, and he said, we were thinking, should the channel be opened more widely, the channel between you and the higher powers, because they could manipulate that, and they could do that. And they said, no, we decided that you were sensitive enough in this particular lifetime, and there was no reason that you should have to bear more suffering, which this would entail. See, and look what happened to Krishnamurti. He went through terrible pains. You know about the story of his initiatory progress. He was being prepared as a vehicle for the Christ to work through or overshadow. So he went through some years as they were getting his vehicles ready for this of excruciating pain because he was being sensitized through an inner manipulation. Certain channels were opened up so he could experience them. But what that means then is there's friction between that and your present condition, and that's pain.
But why then did Steiner oppose him being the new boss?
Well, because, maybe Besant and Leadbeater were pushing too hard, but it was a definite experiment with the overshadowing. And Steiner, was often wrong. He really was. Some of the things he said about consciousness and the history of man, you'd have to throw out the whole Trans-Himalayan tradition if he was correct. He basically said there was no real self-consciousness before 50,000 years ago. That's such an incredible contradiction with everything we are taught. He had, he was a Pisces, a Scorpio rising, and he was a brilliant, brilliant man. I think he thought he was Aristotle. I don't know what ray he was on, but he had very powerful ray 4 and ray 2 as a teacher and ray 5 and so forth. And someone else that I respect said, oh no, he belonged to Master Hilarion, ray 5. I don't know. But, he had all this biodynamic farming and he had many scientific methods and yet could design these wonderful architecturally beautiful buildings, which looked like they were right off the astral plane or something. They had a flow to them. They were not just chunky and angular. They had this flow. So he was clearly an initiate. But some of his interpretations of his psychic impressions, let's just say this, they are at great variance with what Blavatsky gives and what DK gives. So let's just recognize that fact. Without having to make a judgment about who is correct. But, from all we know about Atlantis and early Aryan times, and initiation beginning even Atlantis, and all the mentality required for initiation and the third initiation given Atlantis, it's impossible, if that is correct, that there was no self-consciousness before 50,000 years ago. See, that just wouldn't make sense at all. So all we can do is note the apparent contradictions. We can do that without being in a position necessarily to decide. What else, if anything, came through for you? Any other impressions? Besides, the day is long. Okay, anything else? What have we studied? What have we studied? We could review. Cities face to go up to Jerusalem. Okay. how to have direct contact with the master, what gets in the way, how to create a direct connection between the monad and its expression. So much about pure reason. Maybe not so many pages have been covered, but I think that somewhat covers what we've done. Tomorrow we have the discussion of the burning ground. We're going to look at our lives and see to what extent the burning ground has done its work, and we're going to discover that what Master DK considers to be the burning ground is not what we usually think of as the burning ground. It's a monadic relationship. So a very special kind of burning ground has to have done its work in our lives. I'm sure we've all felt at times that we've been on the burning ground, but that's a relatively lesser type of burning ground which precedes every type of initiation. The monad has to get involved in the burning ground. Okay, so let me just, what I'm going to do is take this, I'm going to take this out, and you know, I know that it's kind of night, it's in the middle of the night in some places, so I'm going to open this up to the group that's on the electronic circuit. We may find that there is nobody here, and their names are just represented. But what I will ask is there anything, friends who are on the electronic part of this, that you would like to say, anything you may have learned, anything that impressed you? If you raise your hand, I might be able to see it. And then I will unmute you and you can speak. So here is Johanna. Okay, Johanna, let's see. Why don't you speak up and let's see if we can hear you.
Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Very good. So the group that is here can hear you too. What country are you in, Johanna?
I'm from Holland.
Holland. Okay, good. So is there anything that you would like to say or that stuck with you today in today's teachings as much as you've been able to participate in it? I saw your name from the beginning. So
yes, I have followed the whole day.
Oh, good. Okay.
And what I like to say is the group responsibility to go beyond the personality, because otherwise the group cannot stand.
The group responsibility to go beyond the personality, because otherwise the group cannot stand. And you can hear her pretty well? Pretty well? Okay, good, Johanna. Thank you for that thought. Yes, there is the group personality, isn't there? And the group is required to polarize at a different and higher point of tension than the personality polarization. That is a big requirement of this kind of work, Antakarana work, you know. So yes, I really agree. That's an important point. Good. Anything else from your perspective? Yes, go ahead.
For me, it is because I'm working with the group. Is this decentralization and love a big issue?
Yes. Yes. This issue. And this was an issue in which DK said certain personality adjustments were necessary in his group, and they were never achieved, he said. And so there was not a real invocative group personality life, because there were still these personal issues between people. So that is an issue. That is something. But I think as
Okay.
our sense of values changes as we begin to see what is important. So they do. So thank you for those thoughts. And
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the possibility.
yes, you can certainly join us. We're open for 4 more days of rigorous reading and thought. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, would anybody else like to speak? I'll look for your hands. Here is Celeste from New York, I think. Celeste, hi.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Celeste.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks so much. I was really struck by the heart as the organ of pure reason,
Right.
and it helped me make some connections between love and intelligent love.
Intelligent love, yes.
So because that can be a bit difficult sometimes to understand, and I need to think about this some more, but I thought it was great.
I think it's an important point, and it's a very Venus thing, isn't it? You know,
Yes.
Venus has a connection with the heart center. You know, DK gives it the Asna center, but it is the fusion of heart and mind, and it is the opportunity for us to cultivate intelligent love. Now, I suppose we really begin to succeed in doing that when we're able to polarize our consciousness actually within the causal body. And this is something he asked us to be able to do even in Letters on Occult Meditation. He said so many of us fail in our meditation because we cannot polarize our consciousness within the causal body. And if you think about the causal body is the second aspect of divinity expressed upon the 5th plane. It's really the union of reason and love, and of intelligence and love. And it is a destination for so many of us to be able to do that, you know, under the impress of the solar angels. So I guess if we can understand more clearly what's required, you know, we can get about the business of making sure we can do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Celeste, for being with us and for offering your thought. Are there any awake or other places? Anybody that would like to offer any thought about these things? Let's see. Just raise your hand. Okay, Diane Ducharme. Okay, Diane. Hi.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Diane. Where are you?
I am in Arizona, very close to Sedona.
Okay, Arizona. I know the area. I spend a lot of time in Arizona. So, yes, Diane, what is it that may have impressed you about whatever you were able to hear today?
I arrived late in the seminar, but what really impressed me was a comment that you made when you were talking about the process of healing. And how the personality can get in the way and believe that I am the one that is healing you and forgetting about where the actual healing comes from.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, it takes a while to get rid of the lower ego in some of these things. The lower ego can appropriate the energies. So the soul is the real healer, isn't it? And the soul is completely decentralized and is unified with the soul of the other. You know, soul-to-soul healing is what we're talking about. And the little ego, you know, the little ego has to get out of the way. It's a phase that people pass through. They're kind of, I don't know, proud of their healing abilities, that kind of thing. But it changes in time. So I think it's an important point. And basically, DK is saying, look, unless you are soul conscious, you can't really be a healer. He also says the same thing about the white magic. He says, unless the solar angels involved, and you are really conscious of these levels, you cannot be the white magician. You could be a purely mental magician, but you cannot be the white magician as he discusses it. Right, so thank you for emphasizing that. I appreciate that. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, for being with us. Yes, I know it was kind of the middle of the night in America, wasn't it? We're going to do what we can. If all works well technically, I've asked my friend and technical consultant, Brett Mitchell, to be recording all this. So in case my recording fails, it will be available for future study. Let's hope it all worked out. Okay, Diane, thank you. Okay, are there any other hands raised? Anything you would like to say? I used to just go down the list and call on you, but I won't do that. Sharon Little. Okay, hey, Sharon. Welcome. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Michael. How are you? Can you hear me?
Well, I'm just hanging in there. I'm at the moment experiencing the blinding light.
I can see that.
It's quite okay. I don't mind.
The light in the head.
Kind of dramatic. Yeah, this is about as close to the light in the head as I'm going to get today. The light on the head. Anyway, Sharon, yes, what about you?
I've just been in for a little while on this, but what keeps striking me is the necessity to develop a capacity to stand.
Yes, capacity to stand. Yes, yes.
And to stand, and not just simply to stand in silence, but at some point to act, to speak out, to verbally create a defending wall against the other mass consciousness that are moving around.
Yes, the standing is not necessarily a passive thing at all. It's a type of focus. Yeah, exactly. We can. It's a kind of, there's a kind of a persistent point of tension in standing, which opens the door to the descent of a certain kind of energy. But once the energy descends, what are you going to do with it? And there's so much abuse in the world that it's necessary often to formulate those words and thoughts which will rid the world of some of the forms that have to be destroyed. So it's kind of a first-rate thing, Yeah. To speak out.
Also, was connected to your rituals, and I remember standing a lot.
Standing a lot. This is another veteran of the ritual.
For a long time, but in the 15 years or so that have ensued, my capacity to stand has developed, and as you say, there was a certain willpower involved and a certain getting out of one's way that was required in order to serve the ritual and the group service there.
Yeah, I think,
Although I would not wish rituals back again particularly.
You don't want to repeat this experience? Here I'm just beginning to offer this to so many, people who are invoking it once again.
I'm willing to share experiences.
Okay. Well, we have to define our limits, absolutely. But so even though that was a pretty literal example of standing, I do think it can transfer over into other areas. Well, yes.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So Anna is saying that she remembers you standing. Anna Summer here. Okay. So.
Oh, hello, Anna.
See, your standing did not go unnoticed. Okay. Unappreciated. That's very good. Okay. Good, Sharon, and thank you for.
Too, so thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Are there any other hands that want to go up, or anybody want to contribute any other thought? I have to see whether Brett is awake yet here. He should be awake. Maybe not. No, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Almost. Would anybody else like to contribute a thought? Yes, we have. Okay, Francis. Hello. Welcome, New Mexico. All right, Francis. Are you there?
Good morning.
Good. Well, good afternoon. Francis Donald, the artist.
You are indeed a specter of light before us here.
Yes, I know. It's so ghostly. I think I'm kind of enjoying the drama of it, So I want to look
at
it.
Your self is finally revealing itself.
Yes. Oh my gosh, the absolute radiance of it all, huh? Later, I'll see if I can see anything. Anyway, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
I know it's early in the morning for you.
Yes, I haven't been able to be with you all night. It would be wonderful, but
I understand. So,
a question about the group standing, this idea of the group stand.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if it has to do with identification with the personality of the group, or if it's the ability to identify with the group's soul. And is that a question of incarnation of the entire group and recognition of yourself as a group that is pre-existent? Or are we in the process of becoming as both a group personality and a group soul?
You know, okay, I mean, I think different people would answer this in different ways, but it strikes me that we are in the process of integrating the group personality, but also learning to take our stand as a group soul. It strikes me that we would never want to stand as a group personality unless it was as a group soul-infused personality. And I think this whole thing about standing in this rule is about a particular point of tension on the mental plane. I think in a way, because it is a sort of a post-ashramic process. In other words, we've all gone through the door if we've done it right, and the third initiation is behind. So it seems to me that the stand is as a spiritual being on the mental plane, responsive to the inflow of soul light, or even that we've managed to identify as a group soul, and are holding our point of persistent tension in that identification. And my idea is that we're working on all of that simultaneously, including the integrating of the group personality. That's my take on it. I do think it is, in these particular rules, a kind of a more subtle thing than, you know, standing with all of our particular abilities. I believe it's a very mental focus. I believe the standing is occurring on the mental plane. That is my impression.
I'm wondering if group personality integration requires individual soul contact.
I think so. I think so, because really, what does he say about integration? That is completed at the third initiation. So by that time, there's already plenty of soul infusion, isn't there? So it seems to me what he means by integration definitely takes the soul factor into account and requires that the members of the group personality have quite a bit of soul infusion. And as a matter of fact, you know, you would think that members of such a group as this would be second or third degree initiates. Not all have to be third degree initiates, but they certainly have to know what it means to put the door behind them. And I do believe it is the real door in the case of the correct expression of this rule. I think we're studying it on a little bit, you know, lower level where we have to. I think it's okay. But, you know, ultimately I think it will be for initiate groups, which is not to say that the soul-infused personality of the group should not stand, you know, and fulfill its duties in the worlds accordingly. But it seems to me that the stand is the sustainment of a point of tension on the fourth subplane of the mental plane, and eventually even on the second subplane of the mental plane. That's my impression at the moment anyway. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's interesting, too, that when you take the group beyond time, that we already stand and we're realizing that potential.
Yes, okay, so you're talking maybe about the collection of the group triads in a way, perhaps, you know, or what we are together on the cosmic ethers or in the realm of the spiritual triad. And then it's just bringing that realization down and through. I'm sure there are higher affiliations that we have that we don't even know about. Somewhere in Letters on Occult Meditation, it talks about all the groups of which we can actually be members. And they get smaller and smaller as you rise. But, you know, there's, 49 groups on the third level of the mental plane, and 42 on the second, and 35. And then you even go on to the atmic plane where there are 14 groups, and onto the monadic plane where there are 7. I think all of those things we have to become cognizant of. Right now, I think we would do well to think of ourselves in our egoic groups and in our egoic relations. And I would think that what we would strive for is this ability of all of us to focus in the soul, in the causal body, and hold that polarization together. I think that would represent for us quite an achievement.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Thank you for the thought. Appreciate you joining us. See, the American people are willing, but they just want to sleep. What is this? I'm sure someone must be pulling an all-nighter somewhere. Hey, here's Andrew. Andrew from Melbourne, Australia. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Andrew. What time is it there?
I just want to say hello to everyone, and also to express my appreciation for the wealth of information and wisdom that come through in all of the work you've been doing recently.
Thank you.
Especially in terms of the old commentary and the infinitization. I've been thinking about the group standing in the way I commonly do, and I've just been really fascinated by the third principle, or the third proposition of Spinoza, where he says that things which have nothing in common cannot be one the cause of another. And I think about in terms of connection, and the commonality is what connects people. And so the more commonality you have, the more the group stands as a one entity.
Yes, it makes sense. There is the Rule 9, isn't there, where he says, let but one color blend them and their unity appear. So basically, integrated groups have to have enough in common via certain predominating rays to really hold them together. How does that ninth rule go? Do you have it before you? The rule for applicants? Oops, that's not going to be there. Let's see. Just maybe you'll find it before I will, perhaps. Rule, yeah, but what I want is the rays and the initiations. And here it is. And I want about page, let's say page 18 or something like that. Oh, that's esoteric healing. How did that happen? I don't want that. But it's an important rule about commonality, I think. It says only then can the group be effective. Basically, he says that. I'll just try page 20. Here it is. He says, let the disciple merge himself within the circle of the other selves. Or sometimes it says, merge himself within the circle of his other selves. Let but one color blend them and their unity appear. Only when the group is known and sensed can energy be wisely emanated. So, you know, you just can't throw a bunch of different ray types together unless there is something in common which can help them merge. So I think it ends up being a very practical kind of rule for us when we think about the groups with which we may be affiliated. Now, most of these groups responding to to Master Decay have some pretty strong component of the second ray in their nature on some level. It may be soul, it may be monadic. If it's only the personality ray, probably they would not stay with it because certain ephemeral relations arise because of the personality ray. But the more long-lasting relations, he tells us in White Magic and also Psychology book, arise because of soul personality relations. And those are the ones who really form the groups on that basis. So, yes, I tend to agree with that. I'll have to... Have you been reading the Ethics of Spinoza?
Yes, Michael, it's one of my favorites at the moment because it really feels like someone who's very intuitive and
yes,
understands things at a very deep level.
DK associated him with the hierarchy. Do you remember that? He says that Spinoza was associated with the spiritual hierarchy. And I think, you know, in Spinoza we get a very wonderful combination of the second and third rays. It's difficult to know which is more eminent, but they used to call him what, the God-inspired philosopher. So yes, I think I have a book by Einstein. Well, it's called a Spinoza Dictionary, and it has some of the selections of, what is it, Benedict, was that his name? Benedict de Spinoza?
Yes.
Yes. And, you know, he was excommunicated from the Jewish synagogue and all the rest of it for his thoughts, and Einstein wrote the introduction to his dictionary, and said that he studies him often and gains great benefit from it. So again, you know, the third and second ray together, I think. Yes, thank you, Andrew, for being with us. And what time is it there where you are?
It's just after 2.
2 a.m. 2 a.m. Oh, good for you. Okay. Yeah. You're going to get some points on this one, Andrew. 2 a.m. That's not bad, all right? Very good.
I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Appreciate your presence. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you. Are there any other folks who would like to raise your hand and say anything about who we have here? Elena. Okay, Elena. You know Elena, don't you? Elena? Hello.
Greetings to everybody there.
Yes, greetings, she says, yes.
I have followed through the day, and there is one thing which, from my previous studies of this rule, I have always attracted my attention, and I have not exactly a clear perception which I would like to share.
Okay.
And that is the group will.
Group will?
Of the group, which is, you know, to what he's saying, to what degree is group will
sufficient,
present in any form vital. Vital, the word vital. You know, he never uses any words without a reason. And for me, the vital is emphasizing the etheric field.
Okay. Can you understand that? I just wanted, because your words are coming through partially, and it's the question about to what extent is the group will vital enough, and she's saying it emphasizes the etheric field. Okay, go ahead, Elena.
Yes. So the group will, and when we're talking about the etheric field, we're talking with the will, we're talking the head. Crown chakra.
Crown chakra.
And spiritual will. Whenever he is using the word spiritual, he is relating to the higher energies.
He's relating to higher energies. I've always thought it was triadal, right?
Yes, triadal.
Yes.
And so everything, you know, the relation of the group field through the etheric field of the group in relation to the group will and the crown chakra. Somehow it's tying for me together because the group is standing in the head, clear light.
Yes, I agree.
There is this relationship here for me, which, you know, I can't bring the exactly what I'm trying to get in here, but somehow, you know, it's on one side is the spiritual will of the personality, and on the other side is the group soul, group will. So you see the relationship I'm trying to together here,
yes,
basically through this etheric field of the group.
Through the etheric field of the group. I remember at one point he connects the atmic plane of spiritual will with the highest head center. And
Yes.
so that is one type of connection, and there will be also, you know, a connection with the sacrifice petals as well. So these several things do come together. Eleanor, let me ask you, this is a practical question. Do you have a headphone set?
I do, but I don't have it at the moment on.
Oh, okay, yes, because I can feel that. That's why the words are not coming through as strongly as they might. The headphone set makes a difference. This is just a technical point. But anyway, you're tying these ideas together of the group will, the group etheric field, the head center, and I suppose some of the jewels are involved in this as well. It's an alignment we're talking about.
Yes, alignment here at these various points, but they are really, you know, from the, maybe we can say, standing on the fourth plane.
Yes.
The mental, but we're going towards the triad.
Yes, say that again, according to?
That we are going
Yes.
high to the triadal energy.
Yes, yes, yes. This whole thing about the group will and spiritual will, the real source for a practical purpose is the atmic plane, the highest level of the spiritual triad. So, you know, it's something that's, yes. Go ahead.
That is giving us a clue that, you know, we're talking at least a third degree group here.
Yes, third degree group, yes. Yes, I agree.
Because, you know, there is no other understanding this relationship with all these higher. I wouldn't use there is involvement of the sacrifice petal.
Yes.
But I see the relation of the sacrifice petal only to the personality more. But the group will has to be connected to the atmic spiritual will.
To the atmic spiritual will. Yes, I agree. The sacrifice petals in this case are secondary. There is, we see the chart that shows that Atma does descend into the sacrifice petals, but it's secondary. Its origin is above. Yes, thank you, Elena. And I would just, you know, I would just suggest get that headset then, because I'm afraid that some of the group may not have heard all you said because of it. But I was trying to make it a little clearer. Thank you very much for your thought. Next time you get the next time the headset. I just put on my headset and was confident and realized it wasn't plugged in. So okay, you know, anything can happen. And everybody is waving. Hold on, here, Elena. Here is Gisela waving. Hello. Wait a second. Have I got you? Yeah, there's Gisela. There we are. Anne is there. Okay. Okay, Birgit is here. Some new people are here with us here. Okay. This is our stalwart bunch here that began so early this morning with Sirius on the ascendant. Exactly, to the minute of art. Okay, thank you for participating with us, Elena. Appreciation. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to? Aha, Joe. Okay, Joe has been helping us from. Where are you now, Joe? Are you in Minnesota? Are you back?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Okay. So, Joe, thank you for joining us. Any thoughts?
Well, I just appreciate the fact that we could see the group. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes, it's kind of fun to see the group.
And I don't have a headset, so I won't say much, but tomorrow would you comment on decentralization and how that would manifest?
Yeah, it's basically about what you look at in your field of consciousness. You know, where are your eyes turned? With decentral, in other words, he's always saying it in this way. Take your eyes off your little self. You know how often DK says that, right? So that's the very strong sentence about decentralization. The person who always has their eyes on the little self, every little thing, how's it going, is not looking out into the wider picture, and the little self is standing at the center of their field of consciousness. So when we remove our eyes from our little self and care more about the larger context within our field of consciousness, it is an act of decentralization. That's how I understand it at the moment. But if anything more dawns upon me tomorrow, I will say so. Appreciate all of your help and all your technical assistance in various ways. Thank you, Joanne. Okay, are there any others? Because we're reaching the time when, you know, the Danish people here, they must eat, you know, so you know how it is. We don't want to let the beast get out of control. Anybody else that would like to say anything here? You're welcome to. And Brett, I don't know if you're with us. I appreciate your presence and your help in all of this. Some of you have really hung out for a long time and wisely left your computers on all through the night, you know. That could be our, you know that Welsh song called All Through the Night? That could be the theme of our webinars here, I think. All through the night. Okay, so it's nice to see you all here, and it's also nice to see Nicholas. I'm glad you're here, and you'll be teaching later this week here. So you're not too far away, but I'm glad you're here in cyberspace with us a little bit. Okay, friends, if there's no one else, then we could together say the great invocation and call it a day. Or I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do the mantra of the new group of world servers. But anyone else who hasn't spoken is invited to speak if you wish. Otherwise, we go to the mantra of the new group of world servers and get rid of that and try to do this here like this. May the power, I wish I could spell, power of the one life. Okay, there we go. Okay. And taking one last look. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Appreciate that very much. And here is our closing mantra. Can you see it all? Sort of? Good. May the power of the one life pour through the group of all true servers. May the love of the one soul characterize the lives of all who seek to aid the great ones. May we fulfill our part in the one work through self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right speech. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you for a good day. You know, it's intense when we study these things. Tomorrow, the burning ground has done its work. So you can meditate on that tonight, and we'll get into the personal application of that tomorrow. And like I say, with Brett's help, we will have all of this stuff recorded in a usable form for people's use. Thank you, everybody from afar, and I'll tell you what, I'll unmute you so you can say, those of you who wish, you can say goodbye. If you wish.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye. That was okay.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Namaste.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining. Okay. See you tomorrow. We start at 5:45 GMT, which is 7:45 Danish time. So we see you then. Okay. Ciao. Bye-bye. Bye. Okay.